Hi, Justin.
Hello, gents. Thanks for having me.
Cool, pleasure. So, Tony, I know, Justin, nice to meet you. We've never met before, but it's lovely to chat to you this evening. What time is it where you are? Is it the afternoon for you?
It is. It's noon.
Okay.
Just yeah. So it's afternoon, but it's my morning because I would say since about the start of January, I've been going pretty full on with everything, with life, with all things going on in the world, with all things going on in Los Angeles, with all things going on leading up to the Warfield release. So
Oh,
haven't been getting a whole lot of sleep.
okay. Okay. So Tony will jump in when he's got some questions. I know he's got a few things he wants to ask you. So I'll start. So just first of all, obviously I know about you. I know some of the music, some of your background, but I want to have a few kind of generic questions in a way. I want to know how old were you when you first started playing music, and what got you into that, Justin?
Oh, wow. Okay. I first got into making music. I want to say the first instrument was two turntables that I asked my dad to buy me as I was very into hip hop. Um, and I just really wanted to do anything related to hip hop, but I didn't have any skills or entryway or anything. I had a direct drive turntable, the kind that's like built into a receiver.
Mm,
And because you can't scratch on it, I took the plastic inner sleeve of a record and put a record on it and traced it and then cut the plastic and then put the plastic underneath and then realized that it still wouldn't scratch. So I tried putting two sheets of plastic under it and it still wouldn't scratch because for those that are listening, there's sort of two types of turntables. Nowadays, they're all sort of based on a techniques, 1200, which is, a very
mm,
manual turntable. But back in the day, you'd put it on, it would just go, right? And so
mm.
when it didn't work with the two sheets of plastic, I put powder, like baby powder, between them, thinking that would make it more slippery so I could scratch. And then it just put baby powder everywhere. So eventually I was like, this is a messy affair. I was like, Dad, can you get me turntables? He got me two Technics 1200s. I got like a cheap mixer and um my dad worked in the record industry, which I think some people think that that meant that I like got a record deal and all this. What it really meant is that like he would come home and go, "Hey, like here's two copies of this promo record because you said you wanted two copies, right?" So I could scratch back and forth. So the upbringing that I had was I was around music a lot because my dad was a promo person for the music industry.
Mm.
Um, so sort of jumping all around, but just this leads to the point of my dad was the guy that like when you had a record you wanted to promote for first 20th century records, then CBS records, and then when CBS became Epic and Columbia, he became the Epic promo guy. So what that meant was my dad would take a piece of vinyl, he would go to the radio station and go, "Hey, check out the new Luther Vandross single. I think
Mhm.
it's hot. Like we think it's a single. Here's the A side, here's the B side. Give it a spin."
Mm.
That was it. And that's what he did. And I would go with him to radio stations and I would do that with him and hand the record to the DJs or hang out and like request songs. So I had access to being around music, a lot of music in the household, and a record collection. So once I saw that my dad was able to get free vinyl, I was like, anything you get that's hip hop, try and get me two. So it wasn't a lot. Like I can honestly tell you, like Bismarcky going off was the first one he got. Actually, that was like the second, which I don't know how he got that because that was Warner Brothers. So that must have been through a friend because he doesn't work there. I got a guy named Kid Flash who had a song called Hot Like Fire. And I did like these three or four like not like records that weren't even like bangers, but I could go back and forth and scratch them and learn how to do the cue point so it would like say the thing over and over that you hear. It's called juggling
Mhm.
beats now, right? But like back then I just wanted to do this and it was so fun. My mom bought me a drum machine, a little Boss Doctor Rhythm, and I would make drum beats and I started writing raps. So like for me, I truly came into it through as a hip hop kid, like turntables, a shitty drum machine that I adored and made beats on every day, and then writing rhymes and just like being into lyricism.
So
Um,
who had you heard that got you into hip hop though? Who were the artists you were seeing or you heard around you that got you into that in the first place?
yeah, my timeline's a bit spotty, but like the things that come to mind, right? Uh, there was a electro artist group called Nucleus, and it's spelled N-E-W. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like the proper spelling, Nucleus, and the song was called Jam on It. I remember hearing Jam on It and going, because it was like an electro song with a really cool sort of like post-Kraftwerky bass line, but there was
Mm-hmm.
like, and it was like a pitched up vocal that sounded like a robot, like a vocoder. But then there was a rap bridge, and I don't know if that was, I mean, you could fact check it. That was probably before Run DMC. I completely missed Curtis Blow. I missed a lot of that stuff, but the first rap that I remember actually like memorizing was Jam on It, and I still know it. Like I have a very ropey memory, but I remember lyrics and I remember lines of movies and I remember certain things very clearly. And I still remember, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Chili D. I remember the first lyrics of that whole rap. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when Run DMC first came out, it felt like a revelation to me. The beats and the sort of like string stabs and this, and then, I remember Hard Times, the song. And, I've never actually talked about this part, but I think what struck me about it was the socioeconomic commentary. Like hard times is coming just like the flu. Watch out, homeboy. Don't let it get you. Prices go up. Don't let your pocket go down. When you get short money, you're stuck on the ground. Like I, that was not like Jam on It talking about a party, right? So I like that. I knew that I liked electro sounds, but I couldn't articulate that. I knew that I liked drum machines, but I didn't. I mean, I couldn't really articulate that. I didn't have instruments. Uh, but I also knew that like Duran Duran was one of my favorite things in the world. So I saw a parallel between the electro songs that I was hearing in hip hop and the new wave that I was obsessed with. Because like my mom was a folk, like a folkie and a hippie who was into like Crosby, Stills and Nash, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor,
Wow.
and the Beatles. And like, so I grew up with the Beatles and I knew the Beatles like obsessively. I had a picture lyric book of theirs with Peter Max drawings. And I could have told you all about the Beatles. And also, embarrassingly enough, because we had that really awful musical when we were as a kid, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, starring the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton. I also obsessively knew all those songs and every all the mystique about that. My dad was into soul music, so Marvin Gaye
Yeah.
was the all end all. Teddy Pendergrass, Luther
Okay.
Vandross, Barry White, Temptations. To me, I was too young for first wave punk rock. When I saw John Taylor and Nick Rhodes in Duran Duran, that was my gateway drug. Like I didn't know goth, I didn't know post punk. I just knew those British dudes are doing something that is totally revolutionary and new, and it's gender bendery and it's cool and it's escapist, and they're on a fucking boat in the, and they're running through the jungle and being chased, and those sounds are fucking banging, and they're hot, and the lyrics are great, and I was obsessed with Nick Rhodes's synthesizer sounds, like obsessed.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so at the same time, Tears for Fears was around. Uh,
Okay.
I mean, like I'm turning 52 in a few months. So I was born in 73. So in 1983, I'm 10 years old. So like, yes, I grew up on like classic rock, but like when new wave and hip hop concurrently started to come out. And when I say new wave, like Missing Persons, like Berlin, B movie, like all of it. Just that was a single driven culture. And I lived in Los Angeles. So living in Los Angeles, we had K Rock, which was at the forefront. So K Rock was it is a Los Angeles radio station where
Okay.
in the late 70s and early 80s, you had Rodney Binghamheimer going, hey, here's this new song by this band called The Germs, and here's oh, and here's the Go-Go's who like Belinda was a member of the Germs. Check this out, you know. And it's like he was
Mm,
he was pioneering punk rock and new wave.
mm,
And so when I was a kid, like there was no you didn't say like, well, I'm into missing persons, but I'm not into Oingo Boingo. Like
mhm,
that was pop music. That was like saying, are you into Dua Lipa? Or are you into SZA? Like they were both these important cultural forces. So all that to say, I was obsessed with new wave when I was a kid because my
mm,
parents were soul and folk and 60s classic rock, which we just called rock, right?
mhm, mhm,
It was too new to call classic. And so when I was sitting there, what you want to carve out your own identity and and claim something as your own as a kid. So
mm,
for me, there was nothing that my parents wanted to do with Tears for Fears or Wall of Voodoo or you know any of these things. So when I heard
mm,
them, and to be very honest, when you're 10 years old, you can go buy certain cassettes and records, but it's
mhm,
mostly singles. So
mhm.
I became aware of artists through singles. So I'm like, oh
Yeah,
my
me too.
God,
Yeah.
like I became aware of The Cure because of a single or The Smiths
Mm,
because of a single. But like I wasn't like listening to like Bauhaus and Sisters and like I was listening to like the popular songs that were on the radio that were the gateway drug. So when I heard Hard Times by Run DMC, not only did I love the it was to me it was like punk rock. To me it was like seismic revolutionary because the other hip hop I heard before was like new wave programming, which I couldn't articulate, right? Like
mm,
Planet Rock is Kraftwerk, it's new, it's electro. All of
mm,
that stuff was cool and dancey, but this felt like a fucking punch to the face. So when I heard Run DMC, that really changed everything for me. And then
mm,
like later the movie like you know, through like breaking and Beat Street, I became really into breakdancing and
mm,
became very into that culture. So all the sort of pillars of hip hop, as sort of coined by KRS-One, of like graffiti, like what does he say? It's like you know b-boying, so it's like you got breakdancing, graffiti, turntabling, rhyming, and
mm,
I forget the fifth. But the point
mm,
is, I was doing them all because also
mm,
by the time I was 12, I was doing graffiti. So like breakdancing, graffiti, turntables, writing rhymes, making beats.
mm,
I'm not a very good member of Zulu Nation to have forgotten the fifth pillar, but the point is all of that shit was the most important thing in the world to me. So hip hop
mm,
took over my life. And that's
mm,
not something that came from an outside source. It wasn't some friend. It was I heard a song and then I sought it out on my own and I got the vinyl. And I still
mm.
have all of those records. Like all of the early
Wow.
records that I have, I still have with my little teenage 11-year-old scribble on it. That
Mm,
changed my life. But like, you know, all that to say, everything that I've ever done musically comes from that. Just
mm.
everything. Like you could
Yeah.
say, oh, well, you made a record in, you know, 2016 called Dream Club that was like Laurel Canyon, California rock. And it's like, yeah, well, that's the shit I listened to like with my mom. You say, oh, like, well, the hip hop shit. Well, yeah, well, because that's the first thing. Well, you know, She Wants Revenge and all these things that you've done. Yeah, because like I was listening to K Rock and like, you know what I mean? And like, it's like Nick Rhodes, you know what I mean? Like, it's all the same thing.
So
Nothing has changed.
that's brilliant. I mean, I can hear all. Yeah, I mean, I can hear all of that in your music. When you mentioned the Beatles, I kind of knew you were going to say that as well, somewhere in there. So, did you go backwards because you mentioned Kraftwerk? Did you go backwards and find them? Because lots of the hip hop guys have cited them as a huge influence, haven't they?
Yeah, so like I I'm not super well versed in craft work.
Hmm.
I mean, like I have some of the vinyl and I've listened, but like really for like B-Boys, Trans Europe Express was the one, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
like
That's it. Yeah, yeah.
like sometimes as a consumer of media and culture, forget about being an artist.
Mm,
Sometimes the thing that sort of samples it, whether literal or figuratively,
Mm.
sometimes how do I say this? Like I was more into like Arthur Baker than I am Kraftwerk, right? So like
Okay, right, right.
so like sometimes you say to somebody, "Hey, you know that show you're watching, it's really great, but like for example, you can tell I can tell my son, I know you like The American Office, but like Ricky and Steven's version is actually better." And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. It's a
Yeah,
generational thing, right? And
yeah,
it's
yes,
where were you? When did you see it? When did you hear it? How did you consume it? So it doesn't matter that I'm more into the Ricky Gervais and the Stephen Merchant version because I saw that when it came out and thought
yeah.
this is revolutionary. Most people in America are still going to consume the one that they saw on mainstream media. So for
Yeah, yeah,
me,
yeah.
I haven't done the footwork to go back and dig too deep into craft work because I was already getting it through Arthur Baker.
Got it. Got it.
So I've listened to them when they did like a 5 or whatever night stand at the Disney Hall in LA and they played all these records.
Mm,
I mean, I think they're brilliant, but like it
mm,
takes a lot to get me out to a show. So like I'm thrilled that I get to watch them in their entirety, a proper show in Milton
mm.
Keynes at the Forever Now Festival. That's like
Okay.
couldn't be any more chuffed. But
Yeah.
I'm a little bit green on the Kraftwerk records
Mm,
and
mm,
catalog.
mm, 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 yeah. So the other, I was going to ask this a bit
Can I
later.
interject one quick thing though?
Yeah.
Sorry. Two things. One is I sort of like buried the lead in talking about the musical stuff because all that stuff that I was talking about, like really the big thing I left out is Bowie. Because
Okay.
like that's the one. Like if you just said one desert island artist forever, it's gonna be Bowie over the Beatles for me. Like it
Oh,
just
okay.
is. Like I heard I heard the album Let's Dance when I was 10,
Mm,
and my uncle had it on cassette and played it in the car all the time. And I was obsessed with that record. And I mean, just listened to it incessantly. And he was like, "Well, if you like that, check this out." And he gave me Man Who Sold the World on vinyl. And then that just began my journey and my life in just being completely influenced by ripping off, obsessing over, studying Bowie. The second thing I was going to say is though Kraftwerk wasn't a real source of inspiration or knowledge for me with electronic music, my my affinity for electronic music is much more like Wendy Carlos Williams, the and movie scores. So like Clockwork
okay.
Orange, right? Wendy Carlos
Yeah.
Williams, or Blade Runner, like
Mhm,
Vangelis, or Tangerine Dream, Risky
mhm,
Business. Then going deeper into those artists. So for
mm,
John Carpenter is like
mm,
probably my favorite electronic music artist from just all Escape from New York, or you know what I mean?
mm. Yeah,
All
yeah, of
of these
course.
films, like
Yeah.
so there's always another entryway, right?
Mm, mm.
So, anyway, sorry about the detour.
No, no, no. I get it. The Bowie one's a surprise, but Bowie's one of those artists as well. I think I was going to ask you about other influences on your life in general, and I think Bowie's one of those people. Apart from being an amazing musician, he's also one of those guys where whenever I get to a milestone age-wise, I always think, well, I wonder how am I meant to behave now? I wonder what was Bowie doing at this age? And I always think he's a great example for how you make the best of that decade. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you could spend your life listening to him, and you're always going to discover something new, and
Yeah.
it'll mean something new to you at different ages. Like
Mhm.
I've been like I was on a friend's radio show where we were meant to be discussing Young Americans, and we didn't talk very much about Young Americans because the host of the show
Mhm.
didn't really know much about the record. But we were talking. I was talking about like him taking Philly soul inspiration and that sort of thing, and working with Luther and the background vocalist, and like then I'm watching footage from that, and I'm just like, it's just amazing. The other day I was watching Bowie do Fame on Soul Train, and like I'd never seen that clip. And like it's just watching Bowie do Fame on Soul Train was so unbelievable and so funky. And watching this entirely black audience groove to this super club banger, and he is just so skinny and so just Bowie'd out in this suit, not the thin white Duke, but another era, and it was just so, and you're like, man, this guy's got the biggest balls, and he's just like, he
Yeah.
just so fearless as an artist, and
Yeah.
he just
Yeah.
clearly, I mean,
Yeah.
look, when he went to Nile Rodgers and said, "I want my first #1 album in the U.S.," he made Let's Dance with intention. But like, I still think most of the records he did, he wasn't thinking about that. He was just like, I don't really care. I want to make a record about what it sounds and feels like
Yeah.
to be in Berlin at this time.
Yeah, do you know what I find amazing as well? You talk about that young American stuff, is how quickly he went from Ziggy Stardust to the Young Americans thing. I mean, and it's a total shift, isn't it? And how convincing he was. Both of those things he did absolutely brilliantly, didn't he?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I mean, when you say convincingly, that's interesting because I think you what sort of intentionally or inadvertently brought up something that I think people don't understand who are like not only lay people but also people that don't have the ability to be chameleon like. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a conversation with Alex Ebert from Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros and
Mm-hmm.
many other groups and incarnations. Back when I was in another band called Tape years ago, he was fronting a band called I'm a Robot, and then I'm a Robot opened for She Wants Revenge before he had done Edward Sharpe. And he said, the thing about people who you like you and me who are chameleons, and I'm like, I've always really hated that word. And he's like, we started talking about how chameleons have this sort of superpower and this ability, and it's a protection mechanism and a survival thing. And so that's why I've always looked at it as a negative connotation. But he sort of framed it as like a superpower of being able to do anything. And we did talk about Bowie, and while neither one of us was comparing ourselves to probably the most significant artist of our generation, we were just talking about like people have a hard time wrapping their head around somebody who's able to do multiple things. And
Yeah.
so like you see it in culture, like if somebody comes out and if Donald Glover's on a show like this, a sitcom in the United States, and he also does stand up, and then he comes out with music, people are going to be like, well, surely one of these is inauthentic. Like, and it's like, why can't he be able to be all those things? Why are people so binary? And so then
Totally.
and then Childish Gambino goes from doing like sort of bloggy fucking early 2000 mid 2000s rap into like these incredible like funkadelic sounding records, and people are like, well, this couldn't be real then. And
Mhm.
it's like, and then he comes out with Atlanta, which I think changes the way television looks and sounds and feels as much as a show like The Sopranos. And then people are like, well, it must be the other people in the room and writing it or the other creators, because it couldn't be him. Why
Mhm.
can't this person just be all four or five things?
Do
And
you know, a few years ago. Sorry to interrupt.
no, please.
A few years ago, I did a psychology degree. While I was on tour, I started doing it. There's a thing in the UK called the Open University where you can kind of do all your lectures online. And I remember seeing how discredited IQ tests were. And I remember one of my tutors saying to me, the only reliable measure of intelligence is the ability to adapt quickly to a new situation.
Wow.
So yeah, isn't that great? So when we were talking about Bowie and people changing like that, and you're talking about people doing that across TV genres and stuff, surely that's better than you see. I mean, I don't want to get into names here, but you see a certain kind of man, a certain kind of person, where they become so set in their thinking and so dogmatic that when you see people who are able to turn around and go, you know what, I'm going to do something completely different and just reinvent myself, which I think is what Bowie did over and over.
He
I think
did.
it's thrilling, isn't it?
But yes, for sure. But I think that there's also another type that we haven't discussed, who's like a Trent Reznor, who is an absolute American icon and a genius, who took, in 80s and 90s industrial music and Depeche Mode and just incredible songwriting and lyricism and made his own thing with it, and then continued to evolve it over 30 something years, maybe, what's it been at this point? Over 30 years, I'm sure. And even though he has a singular voice, and the moment you hear one piano note, you go, Nine Inch Nails. Immediately, that's Nine Inch Nails. You hear two, you're like, well, I know definitively that he is it's so unbelievable. How many artists can you hear one vocal note and you're like, I know what that is? If you hear the opening note of Hurt, you're like, well, that's Trent. His voice,
Hmm.
Trent. His
Yes.
harmonies, it's Trent. His, but he reinvents himself every record in a way that to him is as different as all the things we're talking about, Young Americans, Ziggy, to Station, to, Heroes and Lodger. But to us, it may not sound like that. But for him, he's going, well, that for that record, I used all these synthesizers. For this, I'm
Hmm.
setting up a set of rules where I'm only using this side of the room and this monophonic synthesizer, and I'm going to write in this kind of key. Whatever it is, he has a singular voice and he's reinventing himself, but it's different. Every soundtrack you hear, everything he does alone with Atticus Ross, with his contributors, you're like, that's Trent. I think that's
Hmm.
equally admirable. I've always wanted to be that. I've always wanted to be the artist where as soon as you heard it, you were like, that's Justin. But I'm not that. And that's the conversation that I had with Alex is I lament the fact that I don't have a singular voice, but that I can, like, as I was just going to say, you said convincingly, I can convincingly, I would say authentically, pull out my SP 1200 and do a record right now that sounds like the records that I made in 1993, or a 50 something dude doing boom bap, Native Tongues inspired, Pete Rock and Large Professor inspired hip hop. It's going to be very real and authentic because that's in here and in here.
Hmm.
And it's so real to me. But I
Hmm.
can also sit here and do a song that sounds like, you know, whatever dark, gothic death rock thing or whatever, because that's also a part of me. But
Hmm.
to some people, the ability to do both means that neither is real.
Hmm.
And the other side of what you mentioned about Bowie was the time that it took to get from one to the other. It's
Hmm.
much like between 1960, was it 1960, like the Beatles were only around for 7 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
from 63 to 70,
yeah.
you went from, Please Please Me and the sound of Help, which is this, the sound of like, we let our hair grow longer and now it's just,
Hmm.
2 inch, the fringe is 2 inches above the eyebrows and we're
Hmm.
really letting loose with some amphetamine rock, to let me take you down because I'm going to Strawberry Fields where nothing is real and you're in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
acid
yeah, yeah,
trip
yeah.
and Sergeant Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour. We're talking about 6, 9 months difference. Like, I watched the Led Zeppelin doc last night, Becoming Led Zeppelin.
Mm.
And
Okay.
and it is, I mean, I just got goosebumps. It is so unbelievable what people were able to accomplish. Like Led Zeppelin, like, formed, got together, rehearsed at Jimmy Page's. They rehearsed once in the room. They played Train Kept a Rollin', and they realized that they were a once in a lifetime configuration. They
Mhm.
they went to Jimmy Page's house in the Thames and they rehearsed for a month. They went and played their first show. They made the record.
Mm.
That's how fast it happened. Like,
Mhm.
now it's like, well, you need to set up your single 4 weeks ahead of time to pitch it to DSPs, and then you have to make your digital assets, and you have to, like,
Yeah,
these
yeah,
guys were
yeah.
in a room. They're like, this is it. Jimmy had written some songs. They got together. They toured. They put the record out. And a year later, they were massive and already putting out Led Zeppelin 2.
Mm.
1 year later.
Mm. Mm.
Like, that's 68 to 69.
Mhm.
Like, it's just, music is different now.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're sort of way off the map now, but I do think that as I've gotten older and given less of a fuck, I'm just very comfortable in the fact that, like, I can be like a b-boy, a black hippie, and a person who fronts like a death rock goth band, and it's all real to me. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
because that's just the weird sort of thing that I am. Like,
Mhm.
and the groups that I like have done that well, like Beastie Boys. Like, You're gonna tell me that they can't do like this incredible mandrill or like the meters type funk and do these songs with like Tibetan sort of chant sounds going on and also like funky, cut up songs. Like I
Mm,
love that personally.
mm. I love that. That's wow. Okay, well, yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask it sooner instead.
Sure.
Um, environment. The environment determines consciousness, and I can hear it in your music. I can hear all your different background in your music. So, how do you feel about America now, and does that affect your work?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll give you a shorter answer than the other sort of like circuitous ones I've given. I think that it's an artist's responsibility to be honest with themselves, but I think certain artists have a responsibility to reflect the times.
Mhm.
And when you said environment, I thought about it in the figurative and the literal sense.
Yeah.
Recording in this space, when I walk in here, I feel a certain way.
Mm.
If I were to record right now, it's going to feel different because light's coming in through the windows than if I record at 4 a.m. and it's incredibly dark
Mhm.
and there's just a little bit of lighting coming from here.
Mhm.
I'm going to record differently when it's sunny outside, and I'm going to write and record differently than when it's raining, as it is, this week in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
When people in America were living under sort of the false, the false, I don't want to say false hope because, but when people were living under the false sense of security under the Obama administration for 8 years, I think people got really comfortable. I had a conversation with a friend last night at the Zeppelin premiere where he was talking about a band that he had that was very reactionary, very fuck you, and very a reaction to George Bush in America. But when got elected, besides the fact that the band deteriorated and fell apart for normal band reasons, he got a little comfortable and he felt less angry and like less like he had something to say with this.
Mm.
The music that all the music that we are talking about from beyond, like from before, was generally conceived under conservative regimes and governments in the United States.
Mm.
I think some of the most important music that's ever come out of Britain and the US was under Thatcher and Reagan, right? I think that it is a time where more than ever artists of conscience, and I don't mean that some artists don't have a conscience, but artists who feel compelled and feel it's their duty to use their voice and their platform. I think it now more than ever is incumbent upon artists of conscience and who feel so inclined to speak up and out about what is happening in the United States and in turn happening to the world. Because let's not be mistaken, like, you know, forget about like if the worst thing that was happening under, George Bush era was that the world was policing and that there were incredible wars being had under false pretenses and people displaced and blood and
Mm.
oil and it was not pretty. We're in
Mm.
a whole other world now. I wake up some days and I'm like, how far are we really from children of men? Like, like, like I don't want to sound alarmist, but I truly feel that we are the frog in the boiling water in the United States. And
Mm.
I feel like the heat has been turned up systematically since 2016, and
Mm.
it's actually boiling right now, and people don't realize it.
Yeah, I agree.
We have we have a technocrat who is, by all accounts, a very unstable, narcissistic, possibly ketamine addicted, who's seized control of the United States Treasury with four people who are not old enough to rent a car in the United States. And they have seized control of the Treasury. It is a full stop, full sail coup of the United States.
Mm.
And there is a war on people of color, on women, on queer people, and on the
Mhm.
transgender community.
Mm.
And rights are being stripped away,
Mm.
families are being separated. I just want to point out one thing. We have a foreign-born individual who was not elected in a democratic fashion by the American people, a
Mm,
South African,
mm,
a foreigner, in a time when foreigners are being so demonized in the United States. We have
mm,
a foreign-born individual who has
mm,
seized control of the financial components that
mm,
make the U.S. government run.
mm,
And we have families being broken up. We have uh, the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion,
mm,
and a level playing field
mm,
for marginalized or underrepresented communities, or people who were born under systemic um, imbalances that didn't
mm,
allow for them to achieve at an equal playing field. And
mm,
right, all of those things have been so demonized by right-wing state-sponsored media. The idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
mm,
Uh, there's literally a war on those things.
mm,
And when first it was called a war on woke, then it was called a war on DEI. All of
mm,
these things really just mean that America, more than ever, is further away from the accountability for the original sin of what has
mm,
been done to indigenous and black people in America and
mm,
Asian Americans. And we have a right wing, Christian conservative, white nationalist arm of the US government. We're not
mm,
talking about like outsiders
mm,
who are actually trying to take away women's rights.
mm.
And the thing that people aren't talking about, they're trying to take women out of the workplace, not because they don't want to pay them equally, because they want them at home making babies. So when you
Yeah.
outlaw abortion at a federal level and you take women out of the workplace systematically, you
Mhm.
are then saying, we want you to be home and reproducing. And they're
Mhm.
also trying to get women to reproduce that are by and large white Americans because they believe in great replacement theory. So
I think the other terrifying, but yeah, I mean, you're completely right. I agree with you. I totally agree. I think it's amazing how many people, like you were saying, the frog in the boiling water. I think it's amazing how many people are not seeing this. And I think the point you mentioned about women, I think we're one tiny step away, if you take that to a logical conclusion, where you say, look, if your job is to be the responsible mother at home of this kind
yeah.
of nuclear family, there's no need for you to go to higher education, and that is
That's
already
no,
being said, isn't
we're
it?
already there, and I'm going
Yeah.
to tell you why. Because like we're the reason when you said why can't people figure it out, it's a simple answer. Algorithmically, they get what they're
Yes.
allowed to get, and they
Yeah.
get what they engage with.
Mm.
And when you find creators that are reporting and I hate the word mainstream news, but the truth is
Yeah.
now we're at a point where the sitting president is suing news organizations,
Mm.
and a Fox News right-wing state-sponsored media person is running the Secretary of Defense and has eliminated actual news agencies from the Pentagon. So we
Mm.
have a coup of the United States, even though it was elected to do so. And
Mm.
I'm sorry, not elected to do so, but we have an elected party who won a free and fair election, who is actually doing not lowering the price of gas, lowering the price of eggs, or fixing the economy, but quite on the contrary, is doing exactly what they outlined in this, Heritage Foundation document, Project 2025, that people thought we were alarmist or being crazy about, and just being
Mm.
like, you know, Trump derangement syndrome liberals.
Mm.
What's actually happening is a full-scale coup of the United States, and to your point, they are trying to take away women's education,
Mm.
because I've seen creators online who were applying for who were going to their college professors and saying they're actually trying to get women's studies out of the curriculums now. And so they're like said, I want, you are not at some universities now, they have gotten the word from on high that any term papers that have the word woman or female in it at some universities, they're no longer like letting those be like theses that you can explore. We're getting to the point to where all of these things are true. Now, all that to say, let's zoom out. The only time the average American is going to notice that the water is boiling and start climbing up to the top of the pot to jump out is when it hits their pocketbook.
Yeah.
So they don't care. We can tell them all these things. I can sit down with whether it's a non like a person that's not as apolitical, whether it's a Trumper or whether it's just somebody that's like, hey man, I just don't care. I just know that like $5 is too much for gas in Los Angeles. If I sit down and tell them all this, they're going to be like, how does that affect me? But the moment that Elon Musk tanks the economy and sends a shock to it, and the largest transfer of wealth that will ever happen in the history of the United States will go from the middle class and lower and low income people to these oligarchs, then they will see. And until Americans are willing to take to the streets, such as other countries who have resisted, right? I've been to Hungary, you know, I've been to Serbia, I've been to countries where I've been to Russia, I've been to Ukraine, I haven't been to Venezuela. But I mean, there is something that has been going on politically in the world as a result. Trumpism, it's not about this figurehead. It's not about this thing. It's about an idea, right? And it's about an idea that somebody like Steve Bannon can go to Hungary, can go to Venezuela, and can go like, here's how we got elected. And here's how we implemented these things. And that actually happened. And so now we're seeing a rise in like right-wing nationalism all across the United States, all across the world. So to your original point, I think we are going to see a rise in incredible art, in meaningful art. And when I say that, I mean, I think that from the zine makers and the punk bands and the kids playing punk rock parties to hip hop and rappers having something to say, from artists in the space of singer-songwriters making folk music, I think that you're seeing that at even something as, you know, pageantry and bullshit as the Grammys, where people who are winning are using their platform to talk about things. People of conscience are talking about things. You know, I don't know if it was SZA, but I saw someone give an incredible speech, it's just sort of like on the red carpet with an award in their hand, talking about what it's like to be a woman in America at this moment. To me, I would like to see artists who are apolitical or afraid of turning off a part of their audience speak out more. I would like to see, you know, I would like to see more Chuck D. I would like to see more Kendrick. I would like to see more. I would like to see more artists put their neck out. Because if we do go where we think it's going, I just would hate to just have a record, whether it's whatever comes after or whether it's like such a stupid thing to say, but I always think that like if alien life came down and was like, oh, so this is what was happening politically, well, what did the people do about it? And if they were,
I totally get you. But we had that. You're right. This is happening all over the world. We had that moment in the UK, I think, with Brexit, and I was one of the organisers for a big campaign to try and stop Brexit. I went and spoke at Westminster. I was arranging coach trips, getting people to travel all over the country. We were getting 1 million people on these protest marches, but we lost that to the tiniest margin. And I have to say, I was so passionate, so motivated to stop that. Because although there was a nuanced argument for and against, there was one basic thing. It was racist and anti-immigrant. That was the hub of it. And it was funded by white right-wingers who are just taking their power back here. You can just see it. But I came out of that. I'd been such an activist. I was so political. I came out of it despairing and exhausted, to be honest. And I mean,
that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah. And but it's timely what you're saying at the moment. I've played in loads of bands. I'm in a couple of bands at the moment, and one of them, the singer happened to WhatsApp me tonight, and he's talking about some lyrics, and he said, we have to say this. And I didn't reply. I've left it on red. And I was just thinking, do we have to say this? I'm exhausted. What is the point of us saying this stuff? But after chatting to you, I'm thinking, well, maybe this is the time where we have to say this stuff, and we're going to get a load of shit for it. But
maybe there's no
choice.
There is a choice, right? But the difference between the eras of bygone past that we're talking about Zeppelin and the Beatles, or whether we're talking about Nucleus and Run DMC. Right now, we're sitting here on a Zoom and we're talking. As an artist, I can make a song right now that is fun and upbeat and just celebratory and incredible, and I can promote it here. And in the next post, I can make people aware of what's happening with ICE raids, where they're trying to, deport people who were born in the United States, but because of the color of their skin or their last name, that they're being separated from their families. So I have a platform and a voice, and I have a literal voice and a figurative voice. Sometimes I have written lyrics for my new project, Warfield. There was a song where I was writing, and it was just so fucking political. And no part of me was afraid. I'll say anything that I think, because I just don't give a fuck. Because I'm the person, with my last point I was trying to say is, if I'm leaving a record of documenting the times, as an artist, I'm documenting my thoughts, my feelings, my observations, and the times in which I'm living in. If there's no record of me being in opposition to what's happening in the world in the United States right now, then that means that I'm either complicit, blind to it, right? Or don't care. And so I'm none of those things. So when I wrote these lyrics to the song, I sat with it for a while, and I was like, God, this is so tedious. It just feels like I'm just teaching and preaching, and it just felt super cringe. And I was like, this is not the space and medium for that message. Let me write the song about what the music is telling me it's about. So like I write music before the lyrics. So I listen to the music, and the way that I write songs is I either hear a melody and I go na, 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 and I'll sing that into a voice note, and then later I fill in the words, or something comes to me in the first lyric, and I'll be usually driving, listening to an instrumental, and I'll sing something and I go, oh shit, what's that? And so I type in, or I voice note what the first lyric was. Because to me, the lyric that comes to me, the first idea that comes to me, I look at as a gift and something I have to honor. And so whatever the words are, I always let that be the first lyrics of the song, and then try and decipher what that's about and allow it to come through me. And it sounds a little like, juju, woo-woo, mystical, and high-minded, but the truth is, where does it come from? Like, where does that come from, right? So I have a new song called All the Fun. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Like, the first lyric is, Tiffany eyes, dead set, so sadistic. By the look on her face, you swear she's a mystic. Like, when I was listening to the song, it was like so fast, and I was like, Tiffany eyes, dead set, and I was like, Tiffany eyes. And I went, oh man, like, Tiffany eyes sounds like a crazy, it's so visual. It's where the fuck did that come from? I didn't sit here and go, what kind of eyes? I literally said Tiffany eyes. And and I was like, that's weird. And then I was like, okay, well, that could mean I'm talking about somebody who is materially obsessed, right? Tiffany is the store, and the little, teal books and Tiffany's. And I was like, I don't want to talk about that. This song is fun. Like, I don't want to talk about somebody who's materialistic. But then I said, so sadistic. And then I was like, from the look on her face, you swear she's a mystic. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like, you know what I mean? And then, so I honor that. So my point is, it wasn't that song, but it was a similar song on this body of work that I'm working on now, where I had these incredibly political lyrics. And I just went, it feels like I'm forcing something. So when you said, your singer said this, do we have to? Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe when you're on stage at the microphone, somebody goes and says it on the stage, and people go, "Fuck yes." It's not just the lyrics or the artwork or the liner notes. We have all these things at our disposal now. So for me, if I'm setting up the release of a song and my city is burning and two communities are literally reduced to rubble, I have to acknowledge that. Not only acknowledge that with a level of sensitivity, but I also have to do what I can as a person of conscience and who believes in service, do whatever I have to do to help people while also living my life, making art and trying to support my family and do what I do. So while the lyrics of what I do in the space of death rock and dark wave and dark alternative and goth music are not political, I am a political person. I am the act of rebellion. The fact that I have a social media following with whatever, 20,000, 21,000, whatever it is at the day in the moment, people following me, I'm not going to just go, hey, look at this really great sandwich I just ate. I'm going to say, hey, are you aware that this is happening right now? And then the next post might be, check out my song. Because both things can be true. But for me, I have to reflect the times we're living in. When She Wants Revenge was touring, when it was Barack Obama running against John McCain, I campaigned and we campaigned for Barack Obama, and there was the hope posters on the amplifiers and the kick drums, and I got a lot of shit for it. It was not a popular opinion even when he was running in the primaries against Hillary, because he was considered an outside person and he wasn't part of the Democratic Party establishment. But I was taking a stance. Chuck D and Public Enemy are one of the most important groups to me. KRS-One and Boogie Down Productions, one of the most important groups ever for me. Rakim, didn't just do Paid in Full. He also did The Ghetto, Nobody's Smiling, talking about Project Hell, like that is real. Like I want to speak about my environment. And for me as an artist, one of the reasons why I haven't made hip hop records in some time is because to me, hip hop is a way to express things about your life, your surroundings, your environment, as you said, bring it all back. And I've only made hip hop when I felt like I had something to say and get out. I have a lot I want to say and get out. And so even though I've just launched a solo project in a very different musical space, there's a reason why the drum machine is plugged in. There's a reason why there's some old obscure records to sample. There is a hip hop record in me where I can talk about white nationalism, where I can talk about an attack on a diverse equity inclusion, where I can talk about technocrats and oligarchy without it being like, okay, dude, like, okay, like God, like, you know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, I'm not so hard on myself that if I'm listening to, The Damned and Community FK and Susie and the Banshees and Skeletal Family and XML Deutschland and like, Christian Death and like reading this incredible book called Phantoms about the LA death rock scene. And I just so happened before I was doing all of that, made a song. And then my buddy's like, wow, that sounds a lot like The Damned. And I'm like, oh, like I'm getting into a new lane and moment in my music making where I'm exploring darker, faster, harder things. I have to cut myself slack and go, hey man, if I just want to explore like LA death rock from like 1981 to 82, that's fine too. But like on my platforms, I'm going to talk about the fact that we're living under authoritarianism under the guise of democracy.
So the Warfield stuff is have you done the solo stuff because you feel in your other bands, your other projects, you don't have the same freedom?
No. See, the thing that's really interesting is I don't make music as intentionally as some people might think. Quite often when one thing ends for me, one thing starts. And so She Wants Revenge is not the thing I'm referring to. But I did a project in 2020 during what we call lockdown when we were in quarantine during COVID. I ended up making a solo record that I was going to call Warfield. And the album was called Forever Never Changes. And it was really because it felt like every day was the same, and it was a very Groundhog Day thing where it was just like rinse and repeat for basically March and April of 2020. It didn't even occur to me until a little bit later that Forever Changes was the Arthur Lee record. I was just thinking, and actually, if I'm really remembering now, I had done music with an old one of my best friends and collaborators. We started a band called 1 Inch Punch together, and Gianni Garofalo. We started making songs in 2018, and I want to say wrote down, but typed 4 or 5 different band names. One was Sometimes Forever. One was Forever Never Changes, and then there was 3 or 4 band names. And I found these sort of fonts and logos that I did. We only recorded 2 songs, but he's my childhood best friend. I was like, oh, let's start a new side project. So when I did the solo record in 2020, I was just recording music. At the time, Adam and I were working on the 4th She Wants Revenge record, and then COVID hit. Now I'm alone in a room, wiping down packages and making music. And the music shifted, and I was like, well, I started playing some keyboard sounds, and it started to sound different. And so to answer your question, I sometimes set rules for myself to have creative limitations, and it's something that I've always felt and that I heard Trent Reznor talking about, and I really thought was brilliant, and I took a cue from. I wanted to start exploring different sounds in 2020, meaning fuzz pedals, big guitars, walls of sound, synthesizers that were very, very, very old, keyboard parts that were sort of really upbeat and hopeful, and heavy live drums, and vocals that were more melodic and less minor keys, and really drawing on my love of shoegaze and my love of British music from like the 90s, and some American, but mostly British. So Cocktail Twins, My Bloody Valentine, Primal Scream, Verve, that sort of stuff, Blur, like all of it, you know what I mean? Like, so I made this record because it was something, it was a departure from what I had been doing in She Wants Revenge. I decided I was going to tour it. It was going to be called Warfield, etc. And then I never did. And we got She Wants Revenge back together, and we started doing that, and it was wonderful. I decided I want to put out the music, and I was like, I don't think I want to put it out under Warfield. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like something else. And I went, oh, well, the album title is Forever Never Changes. Why don't I make that the band name? So all of those, like 2 or 3 singles came out, and I'm just releasing the rest of it next week, which is like, it's coming out sort of not very eventfully, but all that to say, because I had already played shows with Forever Never Changes, and because it felt like that chapter was coming to a close, it was like, what's next? And I didn't ask that question intentionally. I was sitting around the house. I was doing my day job stuff, helping other artists. I was watching old 70s TV, hanging out with my family. And then when I would come back here, I'd pick up a bass, I'd start playing something, and I'd start doing some music. And all of a sudden, one day I fire up a drum machine, and I turn the dial faster. And then I pick up the bass, and then I pick up the guitar, and then I go, well, this is weird. When I was making my field trip to Planet Nine, I was doing that. I was making hip hop. 1991, came out in 1993. By the time that record was out, I wanted to do, like, half of me wanted to make like a record like Space, have every sound like Space Oddity. Half of me wanted to be, well, this is not half, this is thirds, like in the band Red Cross, and a third wanted to be making grunge records, right? All of me wanted to be making Jane's Addiction records, and I was like, I don't want to do hip hop anymore. I want to be in Jane's Addiction. It's my favorite group. So I started a band with my friends. As My Field Trip to Planet Nine died, a band called Supernaut was born. Why? Because we were rehearsing songs from My Field Trip to Planet Nine, and I was rapping over
Mm.
this instrumentation. And I was like, my friend writes a riff, and I start singing terribly, but I start singing, and I'm like, well, why don't we just write new songs? As one thing ends, another begins. When
Mm.
Supernaut was doing it, we made a record. I made my music. I did what I was doing. And as that band was falling apart, literally the label, our interpersonal relationships, we started a new lineup, and Gianni and I, who were in Supernaut, found a new drummer. I had written 1 Inch Punch on the wall in graffiti because it was like a Bruce Lee thing. And Gianni's like, dude, that should be the band name. And then we wrote new songs, and out of the ashes of Supernaut, 1 Inch Punch was literally born when we were playing Supernaut shows live, just as we were like getting dropped from the label. And then the next thing you know, I had already done Bug Powder Dust with Tim Simonon, and he was like, we should start a band or something. So when 1 Inch Punch did our first recordings, I sent a cassette to Tim Simonon in London, and he didn't call me. And then when he did, he's like, hey, what are you doing with 1 Inch Punch? I'm like, I don't know. I want to fucking make a 7 inch and get in a van and be in an indie rock band. He's like, well, I'm sad at Virgin Records, and I've just signed a record deal. Would you like to be on Virgin on Hut alongside, Verve and Chemical Brothers and Placebo, which he didn't say Placebo at the time, but I came to be friends with them because they were labeling me.
Mm-hmm.
In the ashes of one thing comes another,
Mm-hmm.
in a transition.
Mm.
So after that, 1 Inch Punch comes back to the United States. There was a long period of time where I didn't make music, and then I started a band called Tape. And when Tape broke up, Adam Braven started coming over, who I had known for many years, and we started making beats and producing music together. We were going to do a hip hop group. And then when we got bored with that, he made a song called, what ended up being called Black Liner Run. He gave it to me to hear. He was going to give it to our friend Kenna. I said, don't give this to Kenna. I'm going to sing on this and play guitar. And I did. And She Wants Revenge was literally born because he did a track for Kenna that I stole and wanted. Also, right before that, my girlfriend at the time said, I want to make some music. Will you do some tracks for me? So she came back from New York City, and we started working on tracks. And I said, what do you want the tracks to be like? And she's like Susie and New Order and Joy Division. So and she's like, but can you play guitar in a very Robert Smith way? And I'm like, that's like, I could play guitars two ways, Robert Smith or Thurston Moore. I don't have any chops. Like I have, they do, but not that they don't. And I started playing. That was in 2003. In 2003, Adam and I started working on stuff together. All of those things led to She Wants Revenge. She Wants Revenge is a continuous thing, even though we've taken hiatuses and broken up and got back together. It's just a band that's going to be around forever and probably not go anywhere. And that's wonderful because we have this way of expressing ourselves musically, and so many people who appreciate it. But when I really felt like Forever Never Changes had come to a close, I don't think that one project or one band can contain all of the things that I have in me creatively or artistically. So
Sure.
since She Wants Revenge is always going to be there, once I had decided that I'd already played Forever Never Changes shows, it felt like I didn't need to play anymore. Like I said what I needed to say. And so I had some songs on a hard drive that I was like, this could be the next Forever Never Changes record. And then I just started, it was like, quite honestly, before the holidays, and I was just like, I just don't feel this anymore. And it was during the election, right? It was like, I started feeling where the country was going, and I was like, the other thing that I'll say, because I'm going on, is Forever Never Changes, that record was written in 2020 in the Trump-Biden election.
Okay.
When there was uprising, riots, looting, fighting, fires, Los Angeles, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, all of these people had been murdered. It was a time, and the lyrics of Forever Never Changes is the first time in guitar, if we call it guitar music, alternative music as opposed to hip hop. It's the first time that I lyrically spoke about those things directly. And like literally the Forever Never Changes record is the most political record I've ever made. But you're listening to it and you're like, wow, this feels like, cherry colored funk or whatever. You're like, wow, this feels so good. And the songs are literally talking about divided families, people fighting in the streets, fucking, and on being on the precipice of a country in spiral and a failing democracy. I released that record 4 years later, right? And we're in a worse position. But the sound doesn't resonate with me anymore. I love it, but that's not the thing. So now I feel I don't want to do this really slow, sort of dreamy, like shoegaze, fucking grunge with like political lyrics and beautiful melodies and harmonies. I feel fucking angry and I want to fucking go faster, harder.
I'm gonna see what Tony wants to ask you. One thing first. Are you an optimist or a pessimist?
Oh, I'm an optimistic realist. I believe that we are governed by not only man's, and I mean mankind's actions, but as well as a spiritual realm and underpinning and things we don't understand. I have friends that are witches. I don't understand. I'm agnostic. I believe in a higher power and I believe in people's better angels, but I think it's hard for people to follow their better angels when in an age of smartphones. Because if we're being very honest, I feel like every problem that we have possibly discussed is simply because of the technology that we're using to talk right now and to communicate with each other. I think that the fall of civilization really lives in that greatest addiction beyond nicotine or any opiate. It's the smartphone. And I think that what has been done to us algorithmically, to our brains, I think that people's better angels are fighting against the technology, which is seeking to either, it's like the shock and awe. They are trying to overwhelm us so that we become apathetic. I believe that there will be a revolution, and whether you look at Arab Spring, whether you look at other countries which are supposedly less developed than the United States, if I believe that revolution may be spiritual, it may be physical. I don't know what it will be, but I do think that when people open up their eyes and realize it might be too late.
Yeah.
And things may never be the same as they were in 2015, and they were not great for many people then, by the way.
Yeah.
But
Good.
I am going to continue to speak up for the marginalized, for the disenfranchised, and for the most the most at risk and under attack in the United States and elsewhere. But I remain hopeful because I do think that I think that we're just going to be at a point where really it's like, I think we're going to be living through a very eat the rich period in American politics. And I think that when people that are middle class and poor of all ideological and political backgrounds realize that they are being pitted against each other in order for just a transfer of wealth, I think that there will be realizations and uprising and change. But I do think then we'll go back to being complacent. So I'm a little bit of a realist. I mean, I'm definitely a realist, but I'm a little bit pessimistic and cynical, but not so cynical that I don't believe change can come. Why would I at 52 soon to be 52 years old, start a brand new project musically, starting from 0 followers? Well, it's because I have a new vibration running through me and something I want to do musically. So I'm hopeful. I mean, why would I launch a new music project and do all of the insane hard work that it takes,
Yeah.
Why would I put a post up there if talking about what's going on in the country if I didn't think that people were willing to care, let alone act on it?
I mean, I've been like, I've had it with other guests on here, people in my everyday life. I'm like a broken record talking about how I think social media and smartphones are at the nub of all these problems. We actually did an interview a little while back, and when I did some research on the guy, I thought, wow, I'm going to disagree with this guy on everything. But I thought, hang on, if I met this guy in a bar, we would find stuff in common. You meet people in bars, in pubs, you just find stuff in common. You realize what you don't have in common and you push it aside and you get on with people. And so I decided to do the same thing. And at the end of the chat, I could completely tell why his views were so different to mine, because his life had been completely different to mine. And in his situation, if I'd had the same childhood, I would have his views. There's no doubt about it. But I think as soon as it comes through Facebook and those bloody algorithms where all they do is either pat you on the back and say you're brilliant, or they throw a load of criticism and abuse at you, and it just polarizes people so much. And every conversation I have about Gaza, Ukraine, Trump, Brexit, whatever, it's these massively polarized positions. And I want to say to people, yeah, but what's the way forward? Because you can't reduce people to just binary tribes, binary laws. There has to be a way forward, like there is in marriage, in families, in the workplace, in football teams, everything. There has to be a way forward for people getting on. And I think you're right. I think mobile phones and social media are just, I mean, they're absolutely evil. I think people will look back at this time in the same ways we look back at the tobacco industries and the petrochemical industries.
I think you're right. I think the what you said is really true about, like, if we're so divided, where do we find the middle, right? And you said, like, football, it's like I can sit next to somebody at a Laker game and like be screaming for something that, like, LeBron or Austin Reeves does, and like high five somebody who could be voting against people I love's very existence, right? Their ability to live in their bodies as who they are. I know that for me, the answer is super simple. One, acknowledging that I may be wrong and that anything that I think or feel at a given time may not be accurate, informed enough, or even true, because my feelings aren't facts, right? And also my beliefs are clouded through my perception and my experience, as you said, and my upbringing. So I may be wrong. I don't know. So if I can maintain teachability and be like, I just don't know. I think something, but I don't know. I'm not certain. Certainty is the death of any sort of intellectual inquiry, I believe. So I am not certain, and I don't know. Two, I don't have to react to everything that I'm fed, either on my phone or in a one-on-one interaction. I don't always have to react, and I don't always have to answer something, whether it's a negative comment or whether it's, I always used to say that Facebook was a bit like walking down the street having a conversation with you, and your uncle, who I've never met, screams from across the street, "You're a wanker." And I'm like, fuck you. I don't even know you. I'm just talking to my friend Rich, and his uncle from the Midlands is screaming to me about my politics because he watches like Fox News or whatever. That's like, it's not a real ecosystem. It's manufactured for outrage, right? So the second thing is, I don't always have to react to everything, right? Same as like if a business situation happens and there's an email and I get upset by something, or a personal message, I don't have to respond right then. I can walk outside, I can see that it's a beautiful day, I can walk around the corner to a shop or go get some lunch, and then I can come back to it, and I can guarantee that my point of view is going to be different on that email or that text, having taken a. The third thing is, in 2020, I bottomed out, as we say in programs of recovery. I bottomed out on outrage. Outrage is a drug that I no longer want to participate in, because it doesn't bring me happiness or joy. It takes me out of the moment. And whatever it is in my present life, whether it's being with my son or whether it's making music, outrage at something that I'm powerless over, that I'm being triggered to be outraged as a tool, is a luxury I can't afford. And then the thing is, sorry, go ahead.
How old is your son?
17.
Okay. I have a son of 26, and I have a son who's 16 in a couple of weeks. And I felt exactly that same thing. It's like, why am I arguing with a guy in North Africa about my favorite football team when I could be chatting to my son about why he hasn't watched Snowpiercer or The Sopranos yet? It's like, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah, I mean, it really became apparent to me when my son was a bit younger, and I'd be on my phone doing something. He's like, "Dad, Dad,"
Mm.
and I'm like, "Oh, I'm
Yeah.
furiously typing, and my thumbs are cramping because I'm fighting with some puncher who I've never met." Like, put the
Yes.
phone down, man. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
what are you
Yeah.
doing? And so,
Yeah.
look, I think that the last thing I was gonna say is I have to find the commonality and that human. Where do I have people, not a lot, but there's probably a lot more that I don't know. But there are people in my life who are like full blown, yeah, MAGA, like Trump, hell yeah. The people that I can think of, and I can count them on one hand. It's not because they're dying to deport families or you know take away people's ability to identify um, as a like like it's not because they're trying to take away trans rights. It's because they're like, hey, this really suits my tax bracket. It's not my business. It's not my business why they support.
Mm.
The thing is, I can look at these people and go, I strongly disagree. I will not convince you for very physical, real, tangible reasons. I will not be able to convince you that this is
Mm.
better for you to,
Mm.
to, to sacrifice and pay more taxes so that
Mm.
these people can have more rights.
Mm.
They see what I post, they know my passions, and they can post pictures of their lives, and I will heart them, and I will message them and say that I miss them and how are you, because I have a human connection with them and I care about them as people. I want
Mm.
the best for them. I am not so full of blind rage and hate and outrage that I can't love somebody or care
Mm.
about somebody um, who has different points of view. So I most certainly can get along with. If I can love somebody and really like, oh man, they're fucking great, who has a different point of view and different politics, then if
Mm.
I have a stranger online or in real life who disagrees with me, I can find the commonality. I played a show in Pennsylvania, She Wants Revenge show, and a guy came up to me and we met and started talking after the show, a little autograph line, and he pulls me aside and he goes, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry. Like, I'm the person who's like come at you a lot. And this is like 2016, 2017. He's like, I want to say I'm the person, I'm sorry I come at you a lot on social media about your politics and this and that. And I was like, it's fine. Like, I don't even remember. And he's like, no, but I said this and I did this. And I was like, okay. And he says, I used to be like a skinhead. And, uh, and my politics are still really different than yours. But you were really, you were really kind to me, even when I was coming at you about your politics, and you never attacked me and you just tried to present me with different points of view. And this is all like in DMs and stuff, because I DM with people all the time. And he says, and like, I've gone through a really hard time. And then he starts talking to me about his brother, who's an opioid addict. And I was like, I want you to have your brother DM me, and I want to provide some options and solutions that I think might help for him in the field of recovery. And he was like, I think he was crying and like hugging me. And like, I wasn't like, fuck this skinhead. Like, and I wasn't like, fuck you for coming at me about politics. I was like, dude, like, your words online don't affect my life, let alone my well-being. Um, and we were able to find commonality, right? And
Mm.
I think I'm not patting myself on the back, like, because there's also times where I've just been like, I'm blocking you, bye. Like, I'm not going
Mhm.
to engage with you.
Mhm.
But I think that, like, you never know. And so it's just better to just sort of keep an open mind. And also, we never know what someone's going through. Someone
Mhm.
could just be like coming at you, and you're like, hey, are you
Yes.
okay? And they're like, no.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I have got two really short questions left, but I want to see what Tony's doing. I was so lost in this conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. I'm conscious of the fact that Tony's got to be here somewhere. Tony, are you still there?
Yes. It's
He's
so
like,
interesting.
why don't you fucking shut the fuck up, Justin?
No, 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 not at all. Justin, I wanted to ask you about your solo project, and you mentioned also about Cleopatra and Brian and Kyle and my friends there. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
I am thrilled to talk about that. Nice hat, by the way. Uh,
Thanks.
I mean, here's the deal, man. Like, I haven't I haven't had a record deal or been with a label since 2011 or 12. It's a long fucking time. I was one of those fortunate people who, as soon as I started making music, I got a record deal really early. And contrary to, like, a couple of internet trolls who think that my dad opened up like a secret door in the back of a room and I walked in and there was guys with cigars going, "Welcome, we've been waiting, Mr. Warfield." The truth is that, like, I had a friend named Kevin Hicks who is raps under the name Danger Boy from a group called Gumbo, and Kevin was over my house and was like, "What's this?" He picked up a sheet of lyrics. I said, "A rap." He goes, "Do you write it?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Will you rap it?" I rapped it for him and he goes, "Yo, you're dope. Let me take you to my producer." Well, his producer happened to be a guy by the name of QD3, which is short for Quincy Delight Jones III. He was Quincy Jones's son. So we started
Yeah.
recording it in the house. And from 14 to 16, I cut my teeth getting rides on the weekends when I couldn't drive, going there. And when I was 16, after 2 years of hard work and learning the recording studio and learning about writing raps, about structuring songs, about all of that, he said, "Hey, my dad's going to put out a compilation record of the artists I'm working with. Would you like to be one of them?" So even though I was a little bit of an overnight success, there was 2 years of really, really, really hard work developing as an artist before I even got a single out. And then it took many years of hard work. But the point is that I was very fortunate to have a record deal when I was 16 years old. And I had a record deal for many years and then I didn't. And so, like, what that means is, like, in an era of independent artists, it's amazing to have found Brian and Matt and Ken and Kyle and everyone and Dave, all the people at Cleopatra, because they've been doing this as long as I have. They've been doing it with a vision and a purpose and a culture and a vibe. There's infrastructure. And to put it real simply, all the Warfield music happened in the course of like 2 months. Like, I just went brrr and wrote. And I wrote a lot of it alone. I wrote a bunch of it with a couple of friends. And as we were getting towards, I feel like, God, when was it? I don't remember, but it was coming into like the fall or the winter. I was like, I should play this for people. And a friend of mine was like, "You know who you should talk to?" My friend John Seidel, who's like a total absolute music industry legend, and I think the father of Los Angeles like nightclubs and restaurants. He was like, "Dude, you should talk to Cleopatra." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, there's my buddy there, Matt. He's one of the smartest music guys I know. He just knows everything about music. He's such a deep, like, wealth of knowledge." So he linked us up and we went to eat and we started talking. I was like, "This guy's great." And it was just about two guys talking about music who connected. And he didn't hear any music. We just talked. And he's like, "Hey man, I would love to do something with you." And then I went to lunch with him and Brian. And I told him, I said, "Hey, like, I'm gonna do this thing called Warfield." And as I said before in the interview, like, I Warfield was gonna be one thing, and I'm glad I didn't use that name and I had that. And I was like, I think I'm really ready to do a solo project. I have these songs that I'm really excited about. They didn't hear anything. They said, "Yeah, let's do something." So I said, "Okay, give me like a month or so." And I gave him like a date and I said, "I think I'll have something." And then I started talking to a couple of other people as well who I had relationships with at a couple other labels. And I sent the music out Thanksgiving, on Thanksgiving weekend here. And Brian hit me back. He's like, "Let's do this." And Matt was like, I can't fucking believe the music you sent me." And it was really exciting. it was really exciting to see that somebody understood what I was doing completely. Like, yes, we understand what you're doing, because we're a couple years older, and we were actually like in the club seeing the bands that you are sort of channeling the spirit and the energy of. So when I explained the concept for what we were going to do, I came to them with a whole proposal. I said, I would like to release this many singles, this many bodies of work. This is what they're called. This is what the artwork is. This is the plan. And they were like, yep, great. And then along the way, I found that I have a really great working relationship with them, where I can go, hey, Matt, what do you think about this or this? And he goes, I think this. And I go, good idea. It's amazing. I mean, it's a great relationship. I had my own imprint called Black Heathers that I released the Forever Never Changes stuff on, and it's just my imprint. And so to be able to release the music through my imprint on Cleopatra is really special, because there's other things I want to do with Cleopatra. What Kyle's doing with rap music there is unbelievable and super exciting. And, you know, what Brian and Matt are doing in the space of music, like, you know, whether it's sort of classic LA punk and rock and roll, whether it's reissues, or whether it's what I'm doing with Warfield. And with what I'm doing with Warfield, like, look, some people are going to call it goth, some people are going to call it, you know, dark rock. The reason why I call it death rock is because that's where the inspiration comes from. Like, ultimately, like any purist, and like there will be a Reddit thread at some point where someone's like, that's not death rock. Death rock is technically, you know, but that's fine, because, you know, when I get a text from Kevin Kipnis, my friend from Community FK, and he's like, dude, love the new single, reminds me of my youth. I know what it is. You know what I mean? Like, I know that, you know, that my friend John Albert, rest in peace, founding member of Christian Death, who left the band to then start Bad Religion and with Brett, and went on to become an amazing writer. I know that if John Albert were alive and I played it for him, he would laugh his ass off, because it would probably remind him of what Roz and he were doing in the basement in Pomona, you know, before I was like able to, you know, stand upright on a skateboard. So the point is that Brian and Kyle and Matt and the team there really understand the music, and they get it, and they are facilitating and assisting and a part of it in a way that's super exciting. And they have a culture, and I'm trying to also build a new culture there. In the same way that Kyle is building a new culture in rap music there, I'm trying to build a new culture there that is a part of what the Cleopatra history and lineage is, but for a new generation of people in darkwave and goth and post-punk and in death rock. And so it's an incredible partnership. It's super exciting, and it's only just beginning, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that record label and their store. And for Christmas, we posted together, Post Punk TV and the Cleopatra Gotmas, some of those songs. So it was pretty fun. I love what you said about your solo project and what you were channeling about meeting the people in a town that maybe you haven't played before with your other bands, and getting to meet your fans there, and also on social media, communicating, like you said, you always respond, or you're on DMs. What kind of music will you be playing besides Warfield? Would you be playing some of your hits from the other bands as well?
So that's a really good question. So Warfield thus far has been me sitting in this chair, and sometimes someone sitting behind me. And we're getting in a room to jam and play through the songs, because there's a lot of Warfield material. And I'm not quite ready to announce the rollout of what's happening right now. It's like we're coming out with songs, so when I make a formal announcement, but there's going to be a lot of music. But all that to say, I want Warfield to be the kind of a space for me as a solo artist to where if I want to play a song from my band Tape, that I can play a Tape song, because there's songs there that I'm like, fuck, those are great, and like no one heard those unless they went to my SoundCloud. How would that sound if I played it right now? And if it lyrically resonates with me still, that would be amazing. So the answer is yes, it will be other songs. I hesitate to use the word hits, but well-known songs from, and unknown songs from my catalog. So for example, I found a Dropbox link last night called JW Vault. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I clicked on it, and it was tons of unreleased music of demos that I've done over the years. I found a song called Black Cat in there, and I was like, holy shit, this needs to be a Warfield song. And I wrote it after my band Tape and before She Wants Revenge, in a window when I wasn't doing anything for like 2 or 3 months. And I was like, this is fucking sick. And I was like, I would have to change this a little bit because I don't like the drum sound, but I was just like, I want to do this song. Now, I will do that song then. If there's a way that I could do Bug Powder Dust, I mean, it might be kind of weird to, you know, but it might be kind of cool. I have enough Warfield songs that I could only play Warfield music and not dip into a She Wants Revenge, a Dream Club, a Tape, or a Bomb the Bass, or Chemical Brothers, or whatever. I have enough Warfield material that I don't need to do that. But I also think that it would be fun to interpret songs from other projects in a new way. So what I would say to anybody who potentially is going to come see me on tour, I don't want to play a set of She Wants Revenge songs as Warfield. That's what She Wants Revenge is for. We're playing Cruel World, we're playing Forever Now, and we'll probably play more shows, you know, in the future so people can get a She Wants Revenge show experience. So I'm going to play Warfield songs, and if I play songs that I wrote, you know, and co-wrote in other projects, I'm going to put a new twist on it so that I can interpret it, because I don't want to do I wouldn't play a Tape song the way that Tape played it. And I wouldn't play a She Wants Revenge song the way that we play it in She Wants Revenge. So I'll definitely sing some She Wants Revenge songs, but I would do them in a way that's super different than the way that She Wants Revenge presents them. I mean, it's sort of interesting when you look at some groups, like, you know, when you're a frontman and a songwriter, sometimes you play songs from your catalog, right? So like, it's good if you know, there's no, I mean, I don't know that there's a perfect analogy, but you know, it's sort of just like, I hesitate to use the analogy of Morrissey and the Smiths, because it's just a bit like, well, what if Morrissey started going solo, but the Smiths never broke up? You know what I mean? It's like he would probably play a bunch of new Morrissey songs, and then he might play, you know, Panic, and he might play Big Mouth, and he might play How Soon Is Now, but he's going to be probably really excited about playing all these new songs that he wrote. And so because She Wants Revenge hasn't broken up, and She Wants Revenge isn't over, and that's still something that's very much like a living, breathing thing, I don't want to go out there as a solo artist and play all those songs when that still exists. But I want to play all the new music I'm excited about. The same way that, like, when She Wants Revenge, you know, did the second record, This Is Forever, we were trying to squeeze as many of those songs into the set as possible. People were like, but we want to hear the first record. We're like, we have all this new stuff. So you'd play as many of the new songs as your fans would allow you to, right? But like, the way I look at this is, I'm the singer in She Wants Revenge, and I co-write the songs with Adam Braven. And so there's a certain thing that I bring to She Wants Revenge as a lyricist, as a vocalist, and as a musical contributor. And with Warfield, I don't have that same collaboration. I'm either recording and writing alone or with different contributors who never wrote on She Wants Revenge stuff. So I think it's different musically. It's a lot more guitar oriented. It's a lot harder. It's a lot faster. It's got a different spirit. And when you're writing things by yourself without committee and without concessions or collaboration, it's going to be different. And even if I do write with somebody else, which I have with this, ultimately they're trying to they're doing so in service of my solo project and my voice. And so I'm going to have the final say in doing so. So when I'm doing this stuff, it's super exciting to play the new music. So all that to say, I'm announcing a tour next week, and I'm going to be playing a ton of new Warfield music that's all going to, like, by the time the tour happens, everyone's going to know those songs, right? And I'll sprinkle in some other stuff. Maybe that song Black Cat from the Vault, maybe like a song from Tape. There's a song called Dream Club, which also became a band of mine. But there's a song called Dream Club that my buddy had mentioned we should play that. And I can think of a couple She Wants Revenge songs that I could do in a very sort of Warfield, sort of punkier way that would be fun. And there'll definitely be sprinklings of all that stuff. But I think what's interesting is I want She Wants Revenge fans to come. I want She Wants Revenge fans to experience what I'm trying to do. I want people who know me from My Filter to Planet Nine and Bug Powder Dust and Placebo and Corner Shop and all the things to come and experience what I'm doing and see the vibe of what I'm doing. And I think that if you like all that stuff that I've done, then you'll probably like what I'm going to be doing with Warfield. Because it's new and it's different, but it still feels like all that stuff that I've been a part of.
That is great, and it's great that you mentioned that, you're such a talented person. Your remixes, I'm so excited that you're willing to play some of that older catalog in a punkier and darker way, and that's going to sound amazing. I can't wait to hear that. Just finally, just one more question. What specifically, Rich is a bass player. I play guitar, but I want to be a bass player, right? So John Taylor from Duran Duran, what are your thoughts on his bass playing? I know that he was influenced by Motown music, and I love the bass. I think any type of music, whether it's metal or post-punk or goth, should have, that slapping bass on it. So what are your thoughts about that?
About the bass?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's the foundation of I hate the term, I sort of am loath to use the term goth, except like, I think for a younger generation of people, it's a culture that, it's not that I don't like the word, it's just, I just don't think it's accurate. Like when I'm sitting there having conversations about making music with Peter Murphy, that's not a word that we're ever going to say. Like,
right.
That word will never trade hands when I'm having a conversation with one of the artists who are the people who created the genre. Right. So like for me, like when you think of like Bauhaus, like I think of the bass lines first. When I think of The Cure, yes, I think of Robert Smith's lyrics, but I also think about Simon Gallup, right? When I think about think about it, like when you think about Bauhaus, like you think about Dark Entries, do you think, like, I love Daniel and Kevin, they're all brilliant. Kevin is brilliant. All those guys are fucking unbelievable. But you hear doom 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 doom. That's what you hear, When you think of Bella, you think of fucking David J. Like I have a great love for bass. I'm not a bass player, but I do play the bass. And I have a hard time writing on guitar sometimes. So a lot of the stuff from Warfield started from me sitting and playing bass, or me playing guitar, but doing so in a way that's not, sitting here and playing like, some like, it's more like two strings, you know what I mean? Like there's a huge difference. Like if you're sitting here and trying to write on guitar and you're trying to do something in the sort of space or genre we're talking about, you're not going to be like sort of like, you're just going to be like,
right.
Then you're like, oh, you throw some chorus and some fucking distortion on it, you get the bass going, and you're just going like, well, you're not going to sit here and like funk and groove out, you're just like, You're like, oh, it's a genre of music. It's super fucking simple. Like, whatever the thing is, if it's in you, it's gonna come out. So for me, it's so important, the bass component in the kind of music we're talking about. I mean, John Taylor, that's James Jamerson, that's, you know, Bernard Edwards. It's super fucking deep, it's slappy, it's funky, it's musical, it's Larry Graham, it's a million things, right? Like, I am not a very talented guitar player. I have a great right hand, and my right hand rhythmically I'll put up against a lot of people. But my left hand is not. I can't. I don't know theory, chords, modes, any of that shit. But I can. My right hand and my sense of rhythm is pretty exceptional. Like, and I can keep great time because my first instrument was a drum machine. It's simple. I can keep great time. On the bass, I can write my ass off and come up with like all the bass except for two bass lines on the Forever Never Changes record I played. And I was able to really play some bass lines that showed that side of that Simon Gallup, that super musical, you know, that, I mean, I just love bass players and I can go through. I mean, we talk about, you know, like, I've been listening to a ton of early Susie over the last year, and like, that has been a guitar inspiration, like true post-punk guitar. Like, and I don't just mean like an Andy Gill, like what people think of like an angular. People a lot of times think of like, you know, the sound that like Block Party brought back in the sort of the post-punk revival of the mid 2000s that She Wants Revenge was a part of. People think of like post-punk guitar as either like stabby, angular, or whatever. But to me, like, Bernard Sumner is like a very post-punk guitar player, and like, I think the guitar playing in Joy Division is exceptional. I've gotten so deep into Johnny Marr over the last few years, it's embarrassing almost. Like, it's so much technique. It's so fucking good. So I'm a nerd. I watch guitar pedal videos and I watch, you know, the Guitar Pedal Show, and I watch JHS stuff, and I'm just watch tons of it's like whether it's Noel Gallagher playing guitar, whether it's Johnny Marr, whether it's like people talking about pedals, or whether it's an in-depth analysis of like, you know, I just I draw inspiration from this shit. And so for me, I got a new bass, and that really inspired a lot. That blue green thing in the back. And just like,
Okay.
I was like, you know, I'm not a bass player, but I bought a new bass, and then I got super excited about, you know, writing songs on a bass. And like, so I wrote a couple of songs the other night, just at voice notes sitting on the couch with a guitar, but I wrote them on the E string. You know what I mean? Like, so it's
Okay.
like, I think that it can't be overstated how important the sound of a bass guitar, either dry with reverb or with chorus, is the foundation of all things goth and post-punk. What I think is interesting differently is that death rock is a sound that's actually more guitar driven to me. And death rock is something that, because it's more punk in its nature, the intersection between punk and goth, and that transition moment that started in LA, to me, that's a more guitar driven thing. And so there's things that I'm exploring that are punkier than anything I've done before, which is exciting. You know, it's like the difference
Okay.
between like Warsaw and Joy Division, right? It's like
Yeah.
they started out being into the Pistols, you know what I mean? And then they started Warsaw, and it was fucking cool. And then all of a sudden, it became a little bit less of Bernard's guitar and a little bit more Hookie's bass. And then you had Joy Division and New Order, right?
Absolutely. Justin, thank you. That was great. Richard?
Yeah, I've I've just one question split into two parts, Justin. What has been your biggest mistake in life, and what has been your best decision in life? So first of all, what do you think your biggest mistake's been?
Two things. One, saying you should to people. whether it's in person or whether it's online. You should is something that I've removed from my vocabulary.
Hmm.
I've lost a friend over you should. And that's because I think I know. And the second part of it is not being certain about what it is that I think I know. Because it's taking a lot of time before making actions and decisions. A lot of times I felt very certain about something, and if I would have just done nothing for a day, a week, a month, a year, I would have made a completely different decision. And that could be creatively, that could be in relationships, that could be in business. So I think that would be it. Like sometimes the best thing to do is just nothing.
And your best decision in life, is that what you think your best decision is, to impulse control, or is that something else?
No, my best decision in life was getting sober. It's a very simple one. I've been what's today's date? In 9 days. Oh wait, no. Yeah, in 9 days I'll be 26 years sober. And for me, that was the best decision I ever did. There's no way that we would be talking right now if that didn't happen. There's no way I'd be sitting in this room. There's no way that I would be married, have a family, have a child. There's no She Wants Revenge. There's no Warfield. There's no, and I would probably be dead. And so for me, it's the easiest answer in the world. It's, for me, sobriety and recovery was the best thing that I ever did.
That's we've had several people say the same thing, and I play with a couple of people. Suddenly, I'm in a band with a load of teetotalers. But yeah, I get it. I think I've been lucky. I've never had that kind of problematic relationship with drink. But I know a lot of people have said that's their best decision, kicking that aside. So yeah, I hear that a lot.
Well, also, like, I got clean in London, which is not something that people tend to do.
Okay.
And like, if you can get clean in London, you can stay clean anywhere.
Right. Okay. Love it.
London in the 90s. London in the 90s did me in and saved me.
Where were you in London in the 90s?
My first place I ever stayed, like proper, getting a flat, and after just visiting in like the usual, Kensington, hotels they'll throw you in as a visitor, I moved into a flat above the Townhouse Studios on Goldhawk Road in Shepherd's Bush.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Townhouse is like a classic studio where a lot of great
I know
records
it,
are made. And also my favorite Indian restaurant in the world is still there after all this time. Shout out to Rajput on Goldhawk Road.
One of my very rare day jobs was in. I used to work in the record and tape exchange on Goldhawk Road.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So
and I loved working there. I mean, I got a salary, but there was a staff record deal, so you got a staff discount. I was so broke, but I had the most amazing vinyl collection.
Yeah, I mean, I lived right there, man. Like, I lived above the studio. Behind us was a Jamaican dub after hours, completely illegal. It was an amazing time. That was 1996. And I moved to Camden, and we got a flat at the corner of Parkway and Arlington at the peak of Britpop, jungle, drum and bass, and trip hop.
Okay.
And then I moved back to the States, and then I moved back to London, and I moved in with Brian from Placebo and off Portobello in West London. And then I moved into my own flat in Camden, off Camden Road, by the skate park. And that was amazing. And then I moved into King's Cross when it was still really, really dodgy.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah.
It was really, I mean, like 98 in King's Cross was interesting. But I moved in with Donna Matthews from Elastica, which is a chapter of a book that has not been written yet that's pretty incredible, which was a great musical education for me, because she's really a brilliant artist, and that was like felt like going to grad school musically and chemically. and then and then I moved back to, oh no, that's when then I moved to Camden Road, and then finished it all off in Labrador Grove again. So
we probably have friends in common. I used to play. Back then. That time I was playing bass for Peter Perrott, or the only ones. And our producer, the producer who did that album, was Elastica's producer as well.
oh, far out. Yeah. I used to do most of my, well, not most, all of my recording, if it didn't take place at Tim Simonon's old place over by Primrose Hill in Belsize Park, we also, like, all of my recording took place at Eastcote.
Okay.
So, like, Eastcote was my home base. And now it's, like, kind of posh and nice. And back then it was, like, you know, it was just, like, that's where I met Dan the Automator when he was working with James Lavelle. And they were working on Corner Shop. And like, that's literally why, like, I was on the Corner Shop, is because somebody said, hey, Dan the Automator's here. He's doing some like Mo waxing or whatever. And like, Dan came up, he's like, hey, nice to meet you. Or no, he's called me down in the studio. I'm nice to meet you. He's like, hey, like, I love your rap. I'm like, oh, dude, I love Dr. Octagon. I just discovered it in Amsterdam. I'm obsessed with it. He's like, listen to this. And he introduced me to like Tajinda and Ben from Corner Shop. And he's like, hey, check this out. And it was like,
oh, wow.
And it was like this song, Candyman. And they're like, do you think you could do a rap on it? I'm like, sure. And they're like, I'm like, give me a minute. I went upstairs, I wrote it, I came back down, I rapped it. You know, 20 something years later, it's a Nike LeBron James commercial. And
yeah, for sure.
wow. But like, you know, Eastcote was the center of all that. Elastica was making what would go on to be The Menace, the great second record. And and like, everybody was there. Like, it was a vibe. It was really cool. And like, I was signed to Hut, which is at Virgin, and that was just across Council Road, like right across the water.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Love it. That's been great, Justin. That has flown by. I thought we were going to do half an hour. I think it's been nearly 2, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure. My only regret for the interview is that you guys didn't speak more. So apologies for.
No, that wasn't the point of it. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, and you know, you're always welcome on Post Punk TV, and thank you so much for the time. An honor. Thanks.
Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.